The marketplace was loud and full of voices. Traders shouted, creatures growled, and buyers walked past cages without even looking. The sun above was harsh, burning down on the steel ground. In the center of the market stood a small cage, forgotten, dirty and half covered with a cloth. Inside the cage sat a girl, not more than 17 standard years old. Her skin was pale blue, bruised in several places. One of her small horns was broken, and her clothes were torn and filthy. She did not cry. She did not speak. She just stared at the ground with empty, tired eyes. She hadn't eaten properly in days, and her hands were tied with old wire. Her body shook slightly from the cold. Even though it was hot outside, to others, she looked like trash, a broken thing no one wanted. Just take her already. The auctioneer shouted. He was a fat alien with oily skin and sharp teeth. Worthless little thing. I'll give her for free with any purchase. No one came forward. No one wanted a weak, dirty girl who wouldn't even speak. Some laughed. Some turned away in disgust. One alien threw a rotten fruit at the cage. Hitting the bars, the girl didn't even flinch. But then, from the edge of the market, a human man stepped closer. He was tall, with a beard, a long coat, and tired, but kind eyes. His name was Mason. He had just landed on this planet to trade parts, not to buy slaves. Still, something made him stop. He looked at the girl in the cage and tilted his head. Her face was dirty, but behind the dirt he saw something else. A spark, a quiet sadness, that pulled at his heart. The auctioneer noticed him. Hey, human, you want her? I'll give her for 1 credit. Practically free. Mason didn't answer at first. He just stepped closer and knelt down in front of the cage. The girl didn't lift her head. She didn't even blink. He could see how thin she was, how her knees were scraped. She looked like she hadn't spoken in years. What's your name? Mason asked gently. The girl didn't reply. The auctioneer laughed. She don't talk. Probably broken in the head. Take her, or don't. I ain't got all day. Mason stood up, reached into his jacket, and tossed a credit chip onto the auction table. I'll take her, he said. There were a few laughs from the crowd. Why would a human want that? Someone muttered. Probably feels sorry for it, said another. Mason didn't care what they thought. He pulled out a tool and broke the lock on the cage himself. The auctioneer didn't even stop him, just waved him off. She's all yours. Fool. Mason opened the cage door slowly. Come on, he said softly. You're safe now. The girl didn't move. She just sat there, frozen like a statue. Mason stepped inside, knelt beside her, and carefully cut the wires around her wrists. Her skin was bleeding underneath. When she still didn't move, he gently picked her up. She was so light, like carrying a bag of bones. Her head rested against his shoulder, but her eyes were still empty. He walked out of the market, holding her like a fragile child. Everyone stared, but no one said anything. They just watched the human walk away with the girl no one wanted. Back at his ship, Mason laid her on a soft bed in the medbay. He cleaned her wounds, gave her water, and left a warm blanket over her. She still didn't speak, but she blinked once, slowly. As if realizing she was no longer in a cage, Mason brought her a small bowl of soup, set it beside the bed, and left her alone. He didn't force her to eat, didn't ask questions. He just waited, quietly, hoping she would one day look him in the eye. He sat in the cockpit for hours, checking the ship's systems, thinking about what he had done. He hadn't planned to rescue anyone, especially not a girl that everyone else had thrown away. But something about her silence, her brokenness, had touched something deep in him, maybe because once, long ago, he had felt like that too. That night, Mason walked back to the medbay and peeked inside. The girl was still awake. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. The bowl was empty. He smiled softly. Good. he whispered and walked away. She didn't say anything, not yet, but for the first time in a long time. She felt warm and deep inside. Something small began to wake up. Hope. The next morning, soft light came through the window of the ship. The girl slowly opened her eyes for a moment. She didn't remember where she was. She looked around in panic, but there were no metal bars. No shouting, no cold floor beneath her. She was in a small, quiet room. Wrapped in a soft blanket, her hands were free. A warm smell came from the nearby table, fresh bread and soup. She sat up slowly, her body still weak, and looked around with wide, tired eyes. She remembered the human, Mason, who had picked her up. He didn't hurt her, didn't yell. He had given her water, food, and a warm place to sleep. It didn't make sense. She had never been treated like this before. She stared at the food for a long time. Her stomach growled. But she didn't touch it right away, in the past. Food was always a trick. Slavers would offer it and then punish her later. But finally, hunger won, and she took a small bite. The soup was warm, the bread was soft, her hands shook as she ate. But no one came to stop her, outside. Mason was working on the ship's engine. He checked the power cells, cleaned the solar panels, and fixed the cooling system. But his mind kept going back to the girl inside. He wondered if she had eaten, if she had spoken, if she was all right. He walked back inside and gently knocked on the door. "You awake?" he asked softly. The door opened slowly, and the girl stood there, small and thin. Holding the empty bowl with both hands, she didn't speak, but she looked up at him, just for a second. Her eyes still had fear, but also something else. He smiled gently. "Glad you ate," he said. "Want more?" She shook her head slowly. Mason didn't push. "All right. Come sit when you feel ready," he said, and walked back to the kitchen area later that day. She sat at the edge of the table while Mason prepared more food. He didn't ask questions, didn't stare. He just let her be. Finally, she whispered something so quiet. Mason almost didn't hear it. "Ali," she said. He looked at her with surprise. "Is that your name?" She gave a small nod. "Well, Ali," he said, "it's nice to meet you." She looked down again. Okay. But a tiny part of her heart felt a little less heavy. Mason showed her around the ship. Okay. Not all at once, just the safe places, the common room, the kitchen, and the garden pod where small plants grew. Ali followed silently, touching walls and looking at the lights with quiet wonder. This ship was nothing like the cold cells she had known. He even showed her the stars from the observation deck. She gasped softly, pressing her hand to the glass. The stars were beautiful far away, glowing, silent. "They're always there," Mason said, "no matter what happens down here." Ali turned her head slightly, looking at him. It was the first time she didn't look afraid. That night, she had a strange dream. She saw her family, her mother, her sister, her home planet. Her mother smiled. But the image faded quickly, replaced by cages and screaming voices. Ali woke up shaking, sitting up in bed, covered in sweat. She walked out into the hallway and saw Mason sitting near the control panel. Half asleep in a chair, he opened one eye and looked at her. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't speak, but she walked over and sat down across from him. Mason didn't ask questions. He just sat there with her, silent, waiting. After a while, she whispered, "Why?" "Why what?" he asked softly. "Why did you take me?" She asked, her voice low and broken. "I was nothing." Mason looked at her for a moment, then said, "Because no one else did, and you looked like you needed someone to try." Tears filled her eyes, but she wiped them away quickly. She didn't want to cry in front of him, but his words hit her heart like a wave for the first time. She believed maybe she wasn't trash. Maybe she wasn't worthless. Days passed, and slowly. Allie started helping around the ship. She cleaned the table, learned how to warm food, and even helped water the plants in the garden pod. Mason let her do things at her own pace, never rushing her. She still didn't talk much, but when she did, her voice was clearer, stronger. She started asking questions about the ship, about space, about humans. Mason answered with a small smile every time. Happy to see her speak, happy to see her healing. One evening, as the stars shined bright through the windows, Mason gave her a small silver pendant. It was shaped like a star, simple but beautiful. I found it years ago, he said. Figured it might belong to someone who needed it more than me. Allie took the pendant slowly and held it close. For the first time in a long time, she smiled. Not because someone told her to, but because she wanted to. And in that small, quiet moment, a broken girl began to become whole again. Not because of magic, not because of power, but because someone chose to care. Allie stood in the garden pod of the ship, watching a small blue flower move slightly under the artificial light. She gently touched the petals, careful not to break them. Her fingers were still rough and thin, but they were healing like the rest of her. Mason walked in, wiping his hands with a towel. He had been working on the ship's engine all morning. He paused for a moment and watched Allie. She looked peaceful, her eyes calm and focused. It was a big change from the frightened girl he had carried from the market days ago. You like that one? Mason asked. Allie turned to him and nodded. It's soft, she said, but still alive. Mason smiled. Just like someone else I know. Allie didn't say anything, but a small smile appeared on her face. She looked down, slightly shy, but not afraid anymore. Something had changed inside her slowly, quietly, but clearly. Later that day, Mason asked if she wanted to help him with a repair job. The cooling pipes in the lower part of the ship were leaking. Allie nodded without fear. He handed her a small toolkit and showed her how to twist the metal valves, fix the seals, and check the wires. She listened carefully, learning fast. Her hands moved slowly at first, but with time, they became more confident when she made her first solo repair. Mason gave her a thumbs up. Perfect job, he said. Allie looked proud just a little, but it was the first time in her life anyone had praised her like that. And it felt good, not fake or forced. It felt real that night. They sat together at the dining table, eating a simple meal. Allie was more relaxed now. She sat straight, made eye contact, and even laughed softly when Mason told a story about his first time crashing a small ship into a swamp. Did you really fall face first into the mud? She asked, giggling. Worse, Mason said, chuckling. I lost a boot and didn't find it until 3 days later. Allie covered her mouth as she laughed, and Mason couldn't help but smile wider. It was the first time he had heard her laugh like that, and it made his heart feel warm. After the meal, they sat in the cockpit, looking out at the stars. Allie wore the silver star-shaped pendant Mason had given her. She touched it often, like it gave her strength. I used to think the stars were lies, she said softly. We could see them from the cages, but never reach them. They felt like hope that didn't belong to us. Mason looked at her and said, now they belong to you, too. You're free, Allie. You can go anywhere you want. She looked at him, confused. Even Earth. He nodded. If you want to see it, I'll take you there one day. She didn't reply, but her eyes sparkled with something new. Something called a dream. But peace doesn't last forever. The next morning, while Mason was scanning the nearby planet for trade, the ship's alarm beeped. Allie rushed into the control room where Mason was staring at the screen. His face was serious now. What is it? She asked, her voice nervous. Mason pointed at the screen. A bounty alert just pinged us. Someone placed a price on you, a high one. Allie's heart dropped. They found me? Mason nodded. Looks like the Slaver Guild wants you back. Maybe they realized who you are. I'm nobody, Allie said quickly, backing away. They can't want me. I'm not worth anything. Mason stood and walked toward her. Don't say that, he said, his voice strong. You're not a thing. You're not a number. And you're definitely not worthless. But you're in danger now, Allie whispered. Because of me. I'm not leaving you, he said. If they want trouble, they'll get it. Allie looked down, shaking. The fear was coming back. The pain, the chains, the memories. All of it felt close again. But Mason took her hand, gently. Will? Face them together, he said. I'll protect you, and you'll protect yourself, too. She looked up at him, and for the first time, she believed she could. That evening, Mason gave her a small blaster and taught her how to hold it. Aim and fire. Her hands shook at first, but she didn't stop. Each shot grew steadier, her eyes focused. Sharper. She wasn't just a rescued girl anymore. She was becoming something stronger. Someone ready to fight for her own life. And maybe, just maybe, someone the galaxy would never dare call worthless again. Allie sat near the control panel, cleaning the blaster Mason gave her. Her hands moved carefully, just like he had taught her. Each time she looked at the weapon, she felt nervous, but not helpless, not anymore. She had trained for 3 days now. Mason showed her how to shoot, hide, and move fast. He even let her wear a basic armored vest. It was too big for her, but she didn't mind. For the first time, she felt like she could protect herself, not just wait to be rescued, but trouble was getting closer. A long-distance scan showed a ship. Following them, it had no name, no signal, no identification, just like slaver hunters. Silent and deadly, Mason checked the scanner again. They're gaining on us. We need to land somewhere quiet. Hide the ship and come up with a plan. He picked a nearby planetee, small farming moon called Veltra 5. It had large green fields, deep caves, and no official patrols, perfect for laying low. They landed near an empty hill, hidden between tall grass and stone walls. Mason powered. Down the ship, to avoid detection, the air was fresh, the sky bright. But Allie's chest felt tight with fear. Do you think they'll come here? She asked softly. Mason looked at her and nodded. Yes, but this time? We'll be ready. They spent the next few hours preparing. Mason set traps around the hill motion sensors, flash bombs, and noisemakers. Allie helped him, following every instruction with care. She knew this wasn't practice anymore. This was real. When the sun went down, the air grew cold. Allie sat by a small campfire, her hands wrapped around a warm drink. Mason sat beside her, checking his blaster. You know, he said, I've met strong people in my life, soldiers, leaders, fighters. Allie looked at him, and you're one of them, he said, without smiling. You just don't see it yet. She didn't answer, but her eyes glowed softly in the firelight. That night, the alarm went off. A silent beep in Mason's wristband. One of the traps had been triggered. He stood up fast, grabbing his weapon. They're here, he said. Allie's heart pounded. She took her blaster and followed him. Her legs trembled, but she didn't turn back. They hid behind a rock wall, watching through a small screen. 3 dark figures moved through the grass, all wearing armor, holding weapons. They were slaver hunters, no doubt, Mason whispered. We hit first, then run toward the cave entrance behind the hill. Allie nodded, clutching the weapon tight. Her fingers were cold, her breathing fast, but she remembered what Mason said: you're not weak anymore. Mason threw a flash bomb toward the hunters. It exploded with a loud bang and blinding light. The hunters screamed, and Mason fired quickly. Hitting one in the shoulder, Allie took a deep breath and fired too. The shot missed, but she didn't stop. She aimed again, her second shot hitting a hunter's leg. The man fell, yelling in pain. The third one fired back, a sharp beam of red light. Mason pushed Allie behind a rock just in time. The blast hit his shoulder, and he grunted in pain. Falling to the ground, Mason? Allie cried, running to him. "I'm fine," he groaned. "Just a burn. Go get to the cave." Allie helped him up, and together they ran toward the back of the hill. The remaining hunter chased them. Firing again and again, one blast hit the wall beside Allie's head, but she kept moving. Dragging Mason with all her strength, they reached the cave entrance and jumped inside. The hunter followed, but he didn't see the trap. A motion wire snapped and a flash explosion burst in his face, throwing him back into the grass. Silence. Allie sat beside Mason in the cave, breathing hard. Blood on her hands from holding his wound. Her face was pale, but her eyes were full of fire. "You saved me," Mason said, smiling weakly. She nodded, holding back tears. "You saved me first." They stayed in the cave until morning, watching. The light returned slowly. Allie sat awake all night, guarding the entrance. Blaster in hand, for the first time, she wasn't the one being rescued. She was the one standing guard when the sun rose. And the slaver ship fled the planet without their prize. Mason said one quiet sentence that Allie would never forget. "They called you worthless. But you just saved both our lives," and that day, in the silence of the cave, Allie understood something. She was no longer the broken girl in the cage. She was someone strong, someone dangerous to the people who once hurt her, and this was only the beginning. The sun rose gently over the quiet hills of Veltra 5. Birds flew through the golden sky, and the breeze touched the tall grass like a whisper. But inside the cave, Allie sat wide awake, her blaster in her lap, eyes locked on the entrance. Mason lay on a makeshift bed beside her, his arm wrapped in bandages. His injury was serious, but not life-threatening. Still, Allie didn't sleep, not even for a minute. She stayed alert, ready for anything, just like he had taught her. When Mason woke, he blinked at the cave ceiling, then turned to look at her. "You're still up?" he asked softly. Allie nodded. "I didn't want to risk it." Mason smiled weakly. "That's the second time you've saved me." Allie looked down at her hands. "I didn't do it alone. You helped me become someone who could fight." He sat up slowly, with her help. "You were always someone, Allie," he said. "You just forgot for a while." Later that day, they returned to the ship. The slaver ship was gone, but signs of battle were still: fresh burn marks in the grass, shattered sensors, and broken parts from the fallen hunters. Allie helped Mason into the ship and sat him down near the med bay. "Rest," she said. "I'll take care of everything." Mason chuckled. "Bossy now, huh?" Allie smirked, only a little. She powered up the ship and flew it into orbit with careful hands, checking every screen like a professional. Mason watched from his seat and couldn't help but feel proud. The girl he had rescued from a cage was now flying his ship, but peace didn't last long as they entered space. A red alert flashed on the screen. A broadcast message played automatically. "Bounty notice. Subject Allie. Alive only. Payment 500,000 credits. Issued by Guild of Iron Star Slavers." Allie's face turned cold. They doubled the reward. Mason leaned forward. They must have seen the tracker footage. "You're not just some girl to them anymore. You're a threat." Allie stared at the screen, her fists clenched. "I'll never go back. No one's taking you," Mason said. "But we need a plan. We can't just run forever." They discussed options, but nothing felt safe. Every system near the Guild's territory was risky, no matter where they went. Someone might recognize her, someone might try to claim the prize. Then Allie remembered something. "There's an old satellite station on the edge of Sector 9. It belonged to my people before the war. It's broken now, but it still connects to the galactic net." Mason raised an eyebrow. "You want to send a message?" Allie nodded. "I want to tell the truth about what they did to me, to others." Show the galaxy who the slavers really are. Mason smiled. Now that's a plan I can get behind. They set course for the abandoned station, flying through quiet. Dusty space, the place hadn't been used in years, but Allie remembered the codes. She had seen her father use them long ago, before her world was taken. The satellite was dark and floating in silence. Allie entered it through a maintenance port, moving through the shadows like she belonged there. She powered up the system, connected to the central core, and opened the old files. She found photos of slaver ships, auction houses, prisoners chained like animals. She found names of leaders, proof of secret deals, and even payments from rich planets trying to hide their part in the trade. Allie sat in front of the screen, her fingers shaking. Mason stood behind her, hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this," he said. "You already proved yourself." Allie shook her head. "This isn't just about me anymore." She looked into the camera, pressed the record button, and spoke. "My name is Allie," she began. "They called me worthless, trash, a thing to be sold. But I survived, and I remember everything. I'm here to show you the truth they've hidden." Her voice was steady, strong, full of fire. She showed the files, the names, the crimes. Then she ended the message with a sentence that made Mason's eyes water. "To every girl still trapped in a cage, hold on. You are not nothing. You are not alone." She sent the message across the galactic network, encrypted and bounced through 100 satellites. It would reach news channels, rebels, lawkeepers, and even the core worlds. No one could stop it. Now, as they flew away from the station, Mason looked at her and said, "You didn't just escape the cage, Allie. You broke it down for others." She held the silver star pendant on her chest and whispered, "Now they'll see what they threw away." And for the first time in her life, she felt proud of who she was. The message Allie sent spread faster than anyone expected. Within hours, the galaxy began to shake. News channels picked it up. Rebel networks shared it. And even neutral systems replayed her voice again and again. Some people cried watching it. Others got angry, and many started asking the same question: who was this girl? In a small hidden corner of space, Mason's ship stayed quiet, cloaked inside a debris field. Allie watched the stars in silence. Her hands were steady, but her heart was racing. She knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. Mason sat beside her, a cup of hot tea in his hand. "You did something big," he said. "They're going to come harder now." Allie nodded. "Let them." But deep inside, she was nervous. The Slaver Guild had power, money, and ships. She had a voice, but was that enough? Later that day, the ship's scanner beeped. A coded message arrived on a hidden channel. Mason opened it carefully, eyes narrowing as he read the words. "It's from a girl named Sally," he said. "She says she was in a cage like yours. She escaped last year and saw your message. She wants to help." Allie leaned forward. "Where is she?" "Close," Mason replied. "She's hiding on a trade moon 2 systems away." Allie didn't wait. "We have to go. There are more like me out there. We can't stop now." Mason smiled slightly. "You sound like a leader." Allie looked down. "Unsure. I'm not. I'm just trying to be brave. That's what makes you one," he said quietly. They left the debris field and jumped into hyperspace. The stars stretched around them like rivers of light. Allie stared into them, thinking of every girl still locked away, still waiting for someone to see her. They reached the trade moon within hours, landing in a quiet docking bay. Sally was waiting, young, thin, with scars across her neck, but her eyes were sharp, and when she saw Allie, she smiled wide. "You really exist," she said, almost crying. "I thought your message was a trick." Allie hugged her tightly. "It was real, and now we do this together." Over the next few days, the team grew. More messages came in, people offering support, safe routes, secret files. Some were former slaves. Others were smugglers or medics who had seen too much. The slaver guild had made many enemies, and now? They were all waking up, but the guild wasn't sleeping either. One evening, while Mason and Sally were working on communications, Allie received a new message. It wasn't encrypted. It came from the slaver guild leader himself, cruel alien. Named Vornok, his face appeared on the screen, cold and proud. "You made noise. Little girl," he said, "but voices can be silenced. Return to us now, and your friends may live. Refuse, and we will erase your name from every star." Allie's hands shook with rage. "Play it again." She told the system. Mason walked in. "You okay?" She nodded, but her eyes were full of fire. "He wants me to run," she said. "He wants me to be scared again." Mason crossed his arms. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to answer him," Allie said. She sat at the console and hit record. Her voice was steady, her eyes burning with strength. "You think I'm still the girl in the cage," she said, "but I've changed. You made me believe I was nothing, but now I know what I am." She paused, then leaned closer. "You made your mistake the day you called me worthless. I'm not alone anymore, and I'm not afraid of you." She sent the message directly to the guild's main communication channel. Sally clapped softly. "That'll burn his pride," but Mason remained serious. "He won't stop now." "Allie, you heard him. Now he'll come in full force." "I know," Allie said, "but I'm ready." They moved their base to a traveling ship convoy, dozens of small vessels flying together under a protection treaty. Rebels and traitors who agreed to keep Allie hidden all across the galaxy. Support grew. Her story had become a spark in the darkness. Still, Allie couldn't sleep that night. She walked alone to the back of the ship and looked out at the stars. Mason joined her after a while. "Are you scared?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "But I'm not running. Not ever again." He nodded. "Good. Because there's something about you now, Allie, something they can't control, can't chain, and can't kill." She looked at him, her voice quiet, but strong. "Hope." Mason smiled. "Exactly. And out there, in the silent stars, the slavers were watching. But so was the rest of the galaxy. And this time, the girl they called worthless was becoming the one thing they feared most, a symbol." The convoy moved slowly through deep space. Each ship flew in silence. Lights dimmed, engines quiet. Everyone on board knew what was coming. The Slaver Guild had sent out a message at live, and anyone who helped her would be punished. But no one in the convoy backed down. They had all seen her message, heard her voice, and believed in her. What started as one girl's escape had now turned into something bigger, something powerful. Allie stood in the center of the main ship, wearing simple armor and holding her blaster. Her silver star pendant hung from her neck. Shining softly, she looked calm on the outside. But her heart beat fast. This was it. Mason walked in. Checking the weapons systems, scout drones report multiple ships heading our way. He said, "At least 3 slaver cruisers." Allie nodded. "Then we don't hide." Mason raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" "I'm done running," she said. "This time, we show them who we are." Sally joined them. Setting up the communications panel, we've connected the signal to every public channel. Once the fight starts, the whole galaxy will be watching. Allie looked out the window, seeing the stars slowly shift as enemy ships approached. She took a deep breath. Let them see. Soon, alarms began to ring. The slaver cruisers had arrived. They surrounded the convoy like wolves around prey. Allie stood at the front window, watching the dark ships block the light. The main screen lit up with a message for Knock. The guild leader appeared again. His face was full of pride and hate. "You had your moment, girl," he said coldly. "Now come quietly or your friends die one by one. Allie stepped forward. "We're not afraid of you anymore," she replied. "We're not your property. We're not your slaves. We're people, and we're done." Living in fear, Vornak laughed. "You'll beg before the end." The screen went dark, and a countdown started. 60 seconds until battle. Mason turned to Allie. "This is your fight now. Lead us." Allie's voice was clear and steady. "All ships hold formation, protect the weak. Fight smart, fight strong, and if we fall, let them remember we stood for something." The countdown hit 0. The space around them exploded in light and sound. Laser blasts flew through the stars. Ships dodged and spun. Smaller ships from the convoy worked together, targeting weak points in the enemy line. The slavers fought hard, but they didn't expect the convoy to fight harder. Allie stayed in the command center, giving orders, calling out movements, and watching every corner of the battlefield. Her voice was no longer soft, it was strong. Full of purpose, Mason was in the weapons room, firing at the enemy ships with perfect aim. Solly handled communication, broadcasting every moment of the battle live. Across the galaxy, people were watching, cheering, crying, hoping, and then the turning point came. One of the slaver cruisers exploded, struck in the fuel core by a rebel fighter. A loud cheer echoed through the convoy. The second slaver ship started to retreat, seeing the growing resistance. Only one ship remained. Mine ship remained Vorn. Flagship Allie locked onto the enemy's main controls and sent a final message. Her face appeared on Vornik's screen. "You can't win," she said, "because you're fighting the past, and we are the future." Before he could reply, Mason fired the last missile from the convoy's cannon. It hit the flagship's engine, sending flames through the back. The ship spun out of control, then vanished into darkness. Silence followed. No more enemy ships, no more threats, just stars, .com and endless. The convoy cheered, people hugged, cried, and smiled. It was over. Allie stood quietly, watching the stars, her eyes full of tears, but not from pain. These were tears of victory, of freedom, of something new being born. Solly walked up to her. "You did it," she said. "You broke the chain for all of us." Mason placed a hand on her shoulder. "They called you worthless," he said. "But look at you now. You're the reason others will never have to feel that way again." Allie didn't say anything. She just looked out at the stars, holding her pendant tight. And in that quiet moment, she knew she was no longer the girl in the cage. She was no longer someone to be thrown away. She had become a symbol of strength, a voice for the voiceless, and her story had only just begun.